Ladies and gents, welcome to today's video. In front of me here is a 2013 Mac Pro with its infamous design. Now, this specific model has a configuration that was never sold by Apple. So let's get into it, talk about the specs, and see if it's a good value here in 2024. So let me go ahead and get logged in, and then I'm gonna switch to a screen recording so you guys can get better resolution without the lens glare. All right, so here we go. We're on the desktop here. I'm gonna go ahead and click about this Mac so we can take a quick peek at the specs. Of course, this is the 2013 Mac Pro, but here's where things get interesting. This one has a 3 GHz 10-core Intel Xeon. Now, that 10-core CPU was not an option from Apple. At least you could not buy this with a 10-core CPU. So if we head into Apple's website here, that's gonna show us the different specs. Right here, we've got ourselves all the details. Now, the standard configurations for this Mac Pro included a 3.7 GHz quad-core Xeon, 3.5 GHz 6-core Xeon, 3.0 GHz 8-core Xeon, and of course, at the high end, you could get that 2.7 GHz 12-core. Now, our model is a 10-core, so that sits somewhere in between this 8-core and the 12-core right here. Well, the reason for that is because the Mac Pro 2013 has a socketed CPU. So we're gonna head into this everymac.com guide here, and it's got a list. I don't think this is a complete list, but you can see that we do have some variations here in terms of the CPU. And I think this is the processor we've got. This is the 3.0 GHz 10-core Intel Xeon. Now I want to find you guys a picture so we can look at the CPU socket. And here we go. This is, we'll do this one down here. So this is sort of the motherboard of the Mac Pro, and this is the socket. I don't remember off the top of my head. I will leave it over here on the right side. That's the official name of this socket. And if you look up a CPU list for that, you can find all of the compatible chips. Now, I've got Geekbench 6 open here, and I went ahead and ran some benchmarks. Before we do that, we'll take another look here. These are the specs of our machine. So we've got the Xeon E5 2690 V2. Again, this is a 3 GHz processor. So it's a 10-core 20-thread CPU, and to prove that to you, we can open up Activity Monitor, and then we're going to do a CPU usage monitor, and for each one of these rows here represents one thread of CPU performance. So there's going to be 20 there, quite a few. So back to Geekbench, I went ahead and ran those benchmarks, and I'll get those pulled up right here. So here we go. We're going to start with the CPU performance. We've got 747 for single core and 4,757 for multi-core. I'm going to go ahead and leave some comparable values over here on the left side, and I'll write down the names for all that. You can pause the video if you're interested in seeing that and comparing the values. Now, moving on from CPU, let's talk graphics. Now, my specific model, as you might have noticed, has the base configuration D300 graphics from AMD. There are two of these in the Mac Pro. I think this is the only Apple computer that shipped standard with dual graphics. Unfortunately, that kind of fell off, but the OpenCL score for that is going to be 21,030, and our Metal score 27,039. I'll leave some comparable results up here on the left again for the Metal scores on the GPU. Now, my specific model has 32 gigabytes of RAM, and you could get that standard from Apple. It came stock with 12. You could get 16, 32, or 64. And unofficially, you can get 128, but it's going to decrease the speed of that RAM down to, I think, 1,000 megahertz or so. So if you want 128, that is going to bring you down in speed. So a little bit of a trade-off there. So what's this computer good for? Well, it's good for web browsing, it's good for viewing photos, and it is really good if you need a bunch of memory and don't have a large budget. These things can be had for pretty cheap. I've seen them for around $200 to $300 on eBay. In fact, let's go ahead and fire up eBay and see what we can find here on the 2013 Mac Pro. So we'll go ahead and type that in, and we're going to see what comes up. So our first result here, these first two are around the $260 range. And actually, these have a 1 terabyte SSD, which is pretty nice. That's the most you could get from Apple in terms of the original OEM style SSDs. You can upgrade them with third-party NVMe drives, but those don't play very nicely. These do have the D300, and here's an interesting one. So this is the 6-core Xeon D500, 16 gigs of RAM, but there's no SSD, and those are actually somewhat pricey compared to traditional PC-style solid-state drives. Let's see if we can find one with the 12 core, which is about what we have here. And actually, this is a maxed out one. So this is that 12 core, 64 gigs of RAM, 1 terabyte SSD, and our dual 700 graphics. That's going to give you 12 gigabytes of VRAM. Just shy of $500 for that one. Here's one running on an auction. Same specs, I believe, although the graphics aren't listed. And let's see what the cheapest one you can get with all of this components included. Might be this one. So we're looking at $230. Appears to be in good condition. It's got the quad core, 32 gigs, 256 on the solid state drive. This probably has the D300, although a lot of times the sellers don't mention the graphics on these specific Mac Pros. Don't know why, but it actually does make quite a big difference because the D300s are very underpowered. D500s are solid, and the D700s are pretty significant graphical performers. So there you go. You can have these pretty cheap. I mean, less than $250. Oh, this is actually a great buy. 6-core, 32 gig, 1 terabyte D500. And this one is around, what is this, $225? Is there a price for shipping on here? I thought it did have shipping. Okay, so it's in Dallas, Texas. So depending on your location, that'll change. So all you need for this, it looks like, is a power cable, and this thing's good to go. So that's actually a very good deal for $230, $225 plus shipping. I think that is a solid deal. And while we're on the topic here, let's talk about the CPU. So this has got the 6-core Xeon CPU. Let me show you guys how cheap these Mac Pro CPUs are. So we're going to type in Intel Xeon E5. And this is the one, this is the 12 core, the 2697 V2. So it came in a couple different clock speeds. This one is a 2.5 gigahertz. It's still a 12 core. $21 free shipping for that 12 core CPU. Here is the exact same one Apple shipped. It's a 2.7 gigahertz 12 core, $26 free shipping. That is a steal. So you can buy one of those base configuration models, throw in one of these 12-core CPUs for like an extra $30, and you've got yourself a pretty solid performing machine. So let me show you guys the external details on this Mac Pro because the I/O is pretty interesting. So here we switch back to that iPhone camera, and here is our Mac Pro. I'm going to go ahead and turn that around for you guys, and we can check out our ports. Down here we've got the power cable, power button. This is an HDMI 1.4, which is good for 4K 30 FPS. Not ideal. Dual Ethernet port, 6 Thunderbolt 2 ports, which is nice, but Thunderbolt 2 never really caught on, so not the most useful. And then up here, we've got ourselves 4 USB 3.0 headphones and speaker output. So the I/O is pretty solid on here. I don't know if you noticed, it actually lights up when you move the Mac. So it's got a motion sensor inside. So if you spin it around to plug something in, those ports are going to light up and you know exactly what you're doing. So that being said, we're connected here to the Apple Thunderbolt display. This is a 27-inch 1440p monitor, and I'm going to try to show you guys the resolution here. It's only a 60 hertz panel, but it actually looks really nice. So here you can see we got that LED cinema display, 27-inch, 2560 by 1440. So very clean. This thing has fantastic speakers. I don't know if you've ever heard these, but they sound awesome. Of course, I've got this thing paired with Apple's Magic Keyboard and the 2nd generation Magic Trackpad. And honestly, this is a pretty clean desk setup if you ask me. The styling on that 2013 Mac Pro looks really nice, and it actually doesn't take up much space. So really clean, and I have enjoyed this computer a lot. Although compared to Apple Silicon, it is not that fast. But if you're going for the aesthetic look, This is a pretty nice setup if you ask me. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed taking a look here at an unofficial 2013 Mac Pro. Apple never offered this configuration, but you can build it yourself. These have gotten really cheap, so if you're looking for something with a lot of RAM, a lot of ports, this could be a good computer for you. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I look forward to seeing you in another one of my videos.